Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Awakening Dragons. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Tracie Loeffler. So, I'm going to introduce her a little bit before handing the mic over. She is a Hellenistic astrologer, as well as a certified hypnotherapist, writer, and editor. And she came to the Hellenistic astrology and hypnotherapy as part of her health journey once she learned that Hippocrates, the father of medicine, used traditional astrology for better understanding of treating patients. And with the tools of Hellenistic astrology, she consistently finds grace, compassion, and deep understanding of both her life and the lives of others. So, welcome, Tracie. Nice to have you here. I
Thank
think
you.
that we're resonating on that, I guess, similarity that we actually both studied hypnotherapy. And I love this quote. I think it's amazing that they used astrology for the better understanding of people. And I think I'm finally coming onto the astrology path because I felt quite overwhelmed in the beginning of like, where do I even start? But for me, it was learning about this modality called galactic astrology. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes sense, right? It encompasses so much more than just the planets. So I think this is how we've connected as well. But because you also do the Hellenistic astrology, I guess, please introduce us to what that is and how does that differ from other forms of astrology and where do they actually relate or where there are similarities to things like galactic astrology?
Absolutely. So thank you. And I'll start right away with there is an intersection between galactic astrology and Hellenistic astrology, which fascinates me because you've got Hellenistic astrology dates back to the 3rd century BCE, and it was practiced up until the 7th century. So it goes way back, and it's named after the time period. So it was the Hellenistic
Mm,
period. So that was the time it was practiced. And in Hellenistic astrology, we use whole signs. And that's the oldest
mm,
house system. And in a little bit, I'll show you the difference between a chart with Placidus, for example, and whole
yeah.
signs. I'm jumping ahead, so I'll stick with just Hellenistic astrology. So in Hellenistic astrology, they really just worked with what they saw in the sky. And they didn't just see planets in the sky, they also saw fixed stars. And so in Hellenistic astrology, there's something called the 15 Bohemian stars, but they're fixed stars, and the overlap is those same fixed stars are being used in galactic astrology as well. And so
Mm,
one of the oldest traditions of astrology being connected to galactic astrology, I think is just really a lot of fun and a lot of confirmation because we can learn from those fixed stars. They're part of constellations and we can see them at the galactic level, but we can also see
mm,
the individual stars that align in our personal birth charts and what's the mythology behind them. So if we have a
mm.
specific star, if there's Polaris, what did Polaris mean to people back in the 3rd century BCE? And that still carries through.
Yeah. So are the, I mean, I guess it's a simple but necessary question. Are the mythologies around the stars really same between the Hellenistic and Galactic? And would you say that mythology kind of is showing us the archetypal energy of those fixed stars?
Absolutely. So just yes, just a resounding yes. And so even a lot of what's done in a galactic astrology, it is referring to some of that information that we have from way back when with the fixed stars. So that is partly what informs our interpretation if you're looking at it from a galactic perspective. So it's yes. It's yes that
Yeah.
carries through. And then we can take it to next level. So with galactic astrology, you can go to next levels of incarnation and karma and histories and that kind of thing. Whereas fixed stars and Hellenistic pretty much just stays with more of that mythology, more of those different
Uh,
interpretations of what they mean. So Hellenistic astrology. So one of the biggest differences, again, is using whole signs versus using Placidus. And I will bring that on the screen in a little bit. But another thing that's really important and why it resonated so much for me is it factors in whether you were born during the day or night. That's like a
mm.
huge game changer. And so I mentioned that you and I were both grand fire trines. And so
Right, which I'm going to ask, what does that even mean? Like, I've always known that I'm a grand fire trine, but what does that
yes,
mean? Like, how does it show up? Because I guess ultimately, if we use astrology as a map to understand ourselves, and part of my interest, I definitely work a lot with mythology, archetypal energy, is like, how do we use this information to understand ourselves, to see
Exactly.
it expressing, to know whether we're in flow or really working against the chart. So yeah, tell us a bit. What is a grand
Exactly.
trine? Grand fire
Exactly.
trine.
And for you and I in particular, how we're different is we've got, often you hear the big three. So you hear the sun, the moon, the rising, or the ascendant. Like those are considered the big three that people look at. And for what it's worth, even in Hellenistic astrology and other astrologies, we present often way more of our rising sign than we do our sun sign. Like our rising sign is who we are, how we present, how people see us. So for what it's worth, that's really important. And when I get into your chart a little bit, even the ruler of that sign, we look where that is in the chart, and that really factors into your life and who you are. But having a grand fire trine with your big three, meaning your sun is in one, your moon is in one, and they're not together. They're not like, oh, I'm a double Sagittarius, sun and moon in Sagittarius. This means you've got all of the fires, and you and I both have all the fires. So you've got a fire rising, you've got a fire moon, and you've got a fire sun. And
That's right.
well, okay, so of course I'm going to like it because I was born with it. A lot of fire, there's a lot of energy. In Hellenistic
Yeah.
astrology, fire is considered closest to spirit. So if you're looking at the different
Mm,
elements, like water is almost the I don't want to say lowest, but that's like the deepest because that even goes below earth and can sink into earth. So fire
mm.
is closest to spirit. And
Interesting. It's not air. Like in one
it's
of my traditions, we kind of always like air. So where does air fit in to spirit?
right below. So air is
Okay.
right below. So it would be water, earth, air, and fire. So fire is at the
Mm,
top, the closest to spirit. Air would be just below. And when you think of even like the elements, because the elements really matter in Hellenistic astrology, or sometimes when I show somebody a chart who either understands working with elements, who are really just, whether it's pagan or whatever work that they do, earth, air, water, fire, people maybe who use tarot cards and understand that, like swords and wands and all of that. I explain it in those terms because it is. So we've got, fire is spirit, air is the mind, earth is the
mm.
body, and then water is the
That's
emotions, and moving through. And that's what people can even take away from this, if nothing else, when they start learning about the signs, whether it's a fire sign or an earth sign, being able to connect them to the elements. Because
mm,
that's, so not having to get caught up into, I need to go online and see what it means to be an Aries. Well, first of
mm.
all, just think, fire and hot, that element,
Exactly.
and add in some
Mm,
spirit. So that's how you can perceive the sign. So a grand fire trine, a trine is an aspect that's formed in a chart. So when you look at a chart, there's different angles. Trine is a very harmonious thing, but when it's a grand trine, that means it's not just one. You've got all of them, all three are lit up. So it's either all three earth signs, all three air signs, all three water. So you and I, for how we present, so our bodies are fire for how people see us. Our purpose is
mm,
connected to fire, and our happy place
mm.
is connected to fire. So it's a very high energy, and sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes it's a lot to
Yes.
hold that much fire. Um,
Yeah.
but how that ties into day or night charts, which, again, where I found the compassion. Now you're a day chart. So you were born during the
What does
day,
that
day,
mean? Day. Okay. So really
day or
born in
night.
the day.
Yep. So if you were
Okay.
born during the day when the sun was up, you can say a day chart, is like a short way to say it, a day chart. Um, and this is where it was a game changer for me, Hellenistic astrology, because almost all of my planets are also in fire. So they're not, beside the
Mm,
big three, I've got a lot of fire. I'm almost all fire. And when I would get readings from people, I even had a reading from some amazing woman who published multiple books and in her mid 70s. They all fell flat for me. They didn't feel like they
mm,
described me because I have a Leo moon. So my moon is
mm.
Jupiter moon up in Leo. And Aries, you and I are both Aries. And so, again, pretty intense there. But with somebody who is that much fire and a day chart. So again, I got a little extra fire. So don't feel like, wait a minute, is this? People would have thought I was just me, 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 me. And can we look at me some more? And then how about some more me? And oh, can we just change everything back to me? And that wasn't me. That didn't feel right. That didn't resonate. I mean, sure, I'm okay speaking and being in front of things, but that focus didn't feel right to me. The houses also didn't, which I'll get to later. What the difference, so anybody who's listening to this right now, if you're born during the day or night, so somebody born during the day is going to have more of a solar focus, more of a me focus. Me focus doesn't mean that you don't care about other people or you're self-centered by any stretch, but just, it's almost like you are the channel. You, like what you're doing right now. Like I look at your chart and it's like, of course, you are the channel, you are the one bringing it forth. It's just you. Whereas people born at night, think of the moon and the moon's energy, they reflect the light of the sun. And so the energy, so if you can think of the amount, I have 6 of my 7 main planets in fire. That fire is reflected outwards. So it's more community focused. Not that a day chart can't do community work, but so much of the energy is just channeled outwards. A really heavy emphasis on service to others, almost to a detriment of themselves, but is very, very other oriented. Whereas somebody born during the day would probably have more of a, I'm not going to say groundedness, because you could have a whole lot of air, and be born during the day too, and you might need a little extra.
I mean, I relate to the different elements in different ways. So it'd be interesting to talk to. But yeah, so
Yeah.
how does the day chart reflect the same fireness then? Like if you had the same planets and all in fire, how does the day chart or express that?
So the day chart, again, that expression is going to be happening more through you, and it's not anything we do, and being on earth and having a body obviously is going to come through us because that's how things happen in life. But you would be more of a, again, if you picture somebody who they are, I keep going back to just, they are the channel, like it's through them. They are the person bringing that message. So I'm very much, I've been in plenty of leadership roles, I can run stuff. It's not that I can't, but there's a degree where it's just, there is such an other focus, almost again to a detriment, like, well, let me support that person and that person. How can I build this up? Like, I often feel like I'll call myself like fairy dust. Like if I get involved in your project, I will bring fairy dust to it and I will make it very successful. Instead of saying, well, hey, let me just make me successful and let me have
Right.
not judgment with it, but it's like it's easier for me to bring a lot of success to others than it is for me to just sit in my own level of being able to take that in. And again, not that it necessarily comes easy for people day or night, but how it changed for me is because somebody with so much fire, there's such a perception of, let's just make everything about me. And can we just change all those conversations? But that's not necessarily true with people who have a lot of fire in their chart and who have prominent Leo, for example, in their chart. So the day part softened it. And how you and I would be different with the day or night is it informs which planets are more helpful for us and which planets are more challenging to us. So it's called doctrine of sect. So if you were born during the day, the planet that would be most supportive for you, your benefic of sect is what it's called, would be Jupiter. So Jupiter and Venus are considered the 2 benefic planets. So by day, Jupiter is going to be, so in Jupiter transits or Jupiter placements in your chart, Jupiter is just going to give you some of that extra goodness. Not that Venus won't, it's just a little bit stronger for Jupiter. So for me, it's Venus. And now going with the malefics, the 2, Mars and Saturn, for me, Saturn is much more challenging of a planet. And for somebody born during the day, Mars will be more challenging. So for me, a Saturn transit My dad just died, during my Saturn stuff, like Saturn is really, really dark in my chart. Saturn is also, there's something called um, dignity, essential dignity. Saturn is very unhappy where he is in my chart. He's considered in fall because he's in Aries. That's his least happy place in the entire chart. So he's in fall, and he's also conjunct my sun and my North Node. And so Saturn has a really, like, he's not happy, and he's affecting my brightness, the sun, because of how close they are. And if you think of them, again, not having to go, like, let me look online what those mean. Saturn, if you think temperatures, would be associated with cold. It's the farthest
Yeah.
planet that we can see in the sky with our naked eye. Mars, hot. So you're born during the day. You can imagine that Mars during the day is going to be extra cranky with the extra heat. Like, he doesn't need extra heat. He's already really hot. And so by day, that just increases his heat. And then for night charts where it's already cold, the coldness is increased. And so that's why Saturn would be more malefic. That's why it's seen that way. And then Mercury goes both ways. So Mercury, it depends on whether because Mercury is so close to the sun, he's always within a certain number of degrees of the sun. If Mercury comes up before the sun or after the sun, then you compare it to your chart. And so Mercury can be good or bad, but you have other factors that you bring into it.
Day chart, you're saying that Mars is already fiery, and so that is benefic or not?
Not. It's taking someone who's already got a lot of fire and giving them some extra fire. So if you're born during the day, Mars is going to be more challenging for you both in your natal chart and with transits. And Jupiter is going to be better happier in your chart and with transits. And for people born at night, Saturn is going to be the planet that's going to be more challenging, both in their chart and with transits. And Venus is the one that's going to bring a little extra to their charts.
So if the average person is not really looking at their transits and things, like I don't, right? I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
How would this information show up day to day? Like, what can someone be more aware of or mindful, just knowing whether they're night or day? Like, what can we tune into, or how can we use this daily without, if we're not looking at our transits and all the movements?
So you don't ever have to look at your transits, because sometimes that's just too much information and you don't need to know.
Probably.
You don't need to know. And honestly, what's going to happen is going to happen. Like, there's some ways, there's something, the predictive technique in Hellenistic astrology is called zodiacal releasing, and it uses Time Lords, which is really cool. Because like everything isn't active all the time. So transits aren't necessarily useful because a Saturn transit's 2.5 years. Does this mean you're going to have 2.5 years of awfulness? Absolutely not. But then in Hellenistic astrology, when you take a look at when is Saturn activated, those are the windows where you might have challenges. So I've been able to drill it down where I know where there might be a 6-day window where my health might be affected by stuff outside of me. So that's useful. And I try not to look. I really try not to look when you have these tools. Sometimes you're like, I just don't want to know. So again,
it's sometimes just too much information.
It's too much,
right? But
matter. So for somebody who doesn't look and doesn't know transits, knowing your chart does make a difference. And so that's where you can use this information. So if you know your chart, if you know where Venus is in your chart, where these different planets are in your chart, then you can really work with that energy. So, but you know what? Even if you never looked at your chart, let's go to that. If you never looked at your chart, but you just knew if you were born during day or night, you can just go outside and connect with the planets. Go outside. And if you want, you can put an app on your phone, or else you can just find out like which one is Venus, which one's Jupiter. Go outside and just connect with the sky. Like, that is one of the deepest things you can do, even as an astrologer. Go outside and connect with, don't just look at the little glyphs on the screen. Go out. What does Venus feel like?
Well, And it's like all this theoretical information. It's like, okay, so how do we actually see it happening? What are we connecting to? So you mentioned that so Jupiter is beneficial, right,
Yes. Yep.
for the day signs,
Yep.
right? So I think you in our side chat you had already mentioned if we look at the two charts, the Placidus and the whole
Yes.
sign, I think my
Yes.
Jupiter ends up being a different house. So let's just assume that
Exactly.
people have houses, but if it's showing up in a different place, what does that mean? Does that mean actually Jupiter is helpful in both of those houses? Like, what can that information mean since there are few systems of astrology and our sign placements can end up shifting?
Exactly. So, and what doesn't, so your signs aren't going to change, just your houses. And so,
Mm,
regardless of what house system anybody uses, their sun, if you have a sun in Aries, your sun will just always be in Aries. It does not matter what house system you use. For
mm,
you, your Jupiter is in Capricorn, full stop. So does, what house system you use does not change that. So the zodiac signs that your planets are in, it just is. That's a mathematical thing. The moment of your birth, that's where they were in the
mhm,
sky in relation to those things. So with house systems, the houses are basically telling you where things are happening in your life. Is it happening with your work? Is it happening in your home? Is it happening in your um relationships? Is it happening in your body? And so that gives us the where. And so a Jupiter in Capricorn. So in Hellenistic astrology, so Jupiter is the happy planet, but his least happy place to be is in Capricorn. So
ah,
no, it's all good. It's all good. They're still benefic. And again, it doesn't matter if you're day or night. Jupiter's a good guy no matter what. Jupiter doesn't look, because picture Capricorn, right? Like it's Capricorn's ruled by Saturn, and it's like hardworking, and it's got, the rules, and it's just like those earthy workers. And then you've got Jupiter, which is like, expansive and just kind of freedom and just these like spiritual things.
almost like an opposition energy, isn't it?
It is, it is. But with yours, what happens is you go from having in the fifth house to the sixth house. So the where, so how Jupiter expresses isn't necessarily changed, but where in your life it changes. And so by moving from the fifth house for you to the sixth house with Jupiter, sixth house in traditional astrology, Hellenistic astrology, is a house of illness and injury, but it's also your
Mm,
daily routine, like how you
mhm,
do life, how you do work. And so for you, because he's benefic, because you're a day chart, so Jupiter is like a little extra for you. That would be a positive thing. I wouldn't see, like, I've got Mars, even though he's good for me, I have Mars in the sixth house, which means lifelong health
mhm,
issues. So I have a
mm,
malefic, a not happy planet in the sixth house. So that would denote health issues. You've got this lovely, happy, benefic planet. And so the flip side of that would be really having a lot of strength in that area. And so even if we were to switch to thinking of purpose in life, like that's part of it. Sixth house is just how you do your daily life, how you do that expression. And so you've got that Capricorn energy with your sixth house, which would be somebody who's hardworking. Somebody like, if
mhm.
you could only interview people based on charts, you would be like, hire her, because you've got these, like, of your second house, your sixth house, your 10th, you've got this, like, this grounded, these earth signs, which is like somebody who is just steady and stable. So you might have that fire of your sun, moon, and rising, but in those signs that pertain to job, career, purpose, you've got that earth
Mm,
and that stability and
yeah.
that hardworking, and almost like you can
Mm,
bring that spirit down because you're not just up here with fire, you've got that groundedness, so you can
yeah, I
earth.
do like a lot of that work is about that whole anchoring, it's like
Yeah.
pull it up from there and really bring it down.
Yeah.
I'm resonating a lot with the whole, just going, like it does. I mean, in uh human design as well, like I'm a generator, which just means it's just like this
Yeah.
powerhouse of energy constantly.
Yeah.
Um, in switching the houses then, so it was in fifth and now it's in sixth,
Mhm.
is that kind of just again more information to say yes, your Jupiter was already there and is
Mhm.
expressing in your fifth house with looking at the Hellenistic system? Is that also then saying it is also expressing in your sixth house? Like, is that how we look at that information when we
It
look at the
depends on who you
change?
are. Yeah, it depends.
Mm.
Some people will be like a purist and go, no, whole sign is the oldest system. That's the right system. Or Placidus, it's like I identify with that so much. I can't take. So some people are just going to have strong affinities to one, and some people
Right.
just might be like, this is it. Other people
Mm.
can look at it and say, this is just more information. And that's okay.
Mm.
And I take in both. For me, it changes a lot of signs, or not a lot of signs, a lot of planets. So I would have had a heavy fourth house focus that bumped over to the fifth. And that just feels truer. So I think there is a degree, though, of a both and. I think if you're
Yeah.
used to Placidus, I think you can take elements of both. And even with Placidus, like the house system is the house system, but you can still know that, with a day chart, certain planets might be stronger for you. So you might still love Placidus, but you can still know that, well, these are going to be my
Mm.
benefit. This is going to be a little bit stronger for me. This is, there's element connections to the
Mm.
signs, so there's different things that you can still bring to it. So they're not, maybe this is a sin for me to say they're not mutually exclusive, but I think we can learn from
Good. I
everything.
mean, I'm definitely someone who works with different maps,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that to be committed to one. In fact, we should look at several, like
Yeah.
not in a way that's dating us with information and
Yeah.
intellectualizing, but more from a perspective of what did I need to know from Hellenistic astrology that I didn't know from anything else. And
Yes.
I think that's what
Yes.
maps are really helpful for.
Yes.
That
Yes.
being said, what are the fixed stars? What is the story, the mythology that's running through the charts? I know that you've had a look, you've run it in the two houses. So what are the
Yeah.
highlights, if you call it? I guess one of the intentions is also to have people see their story,
Mhm.
resonate with, oh yeah, I see how that has shown
Mhm.
up in life. So
Yeah.
what life story can you tell me about me without knowing
Yeah.
me?
So let's take a peek. So we'll do a screen share, but I'll also share this. So for those that are listening, you're not going to miss everything by not having it on screen. But I will bring that up just kind of as a point of reference for you to follow. So here I'll do the screen share, and I will bring up first just a little peek of what I was meaning by Placidus versus whole sign. So again, the signs are going to stay in the same order on that same wheel, no matter what house system you use. So that is just a
Mm.
foundation. So it's always going to be Taurus will always follow Aries. It will always be that way. But now the houses, again, the houses are where in the life things show up. So if planets are the what shows up in your life, and the signs are
Mm.
how they show up in your life, the houses show you where. And that is where you're going
Mm.
to feel the difference. And for people that are just seeing this on the screen, on the left side, I have whole sign. On the right, I have Placidus. And the main thing that you're going to notice is there's different sizes to the houses. So in whole
Mm.
signs, every house, it's divided into 30 degrees. So whether it's Placidus or whole sign, it's 360 degrees to go around the whole circle. In whole signs, it just means there's one sign per house, and each one is 30
Yeah.
degrees all the way through. In Placidus, that differs. And so if you look over to the right for those who see the screen, you could look up here maybe to the eighth house, and you can see proportionately it's much smaller. And
Mm.
if you look down here on the bottom, for those who can see the screen, you've got planets that are both Sagittarius and Capricorn falling underneath the fifth house. So you can have
Mm.
two different signs in one house. And that's something you can't have in whole signs. So whole signs, for your chart, for example, your first house is Leo, end of story. Your fifth house is Sag, end of story. And Placidus, you can have, like you've got, Sagittarius and Capricorn together. So that's the biggest difference. Just visually, you're going to see different sizes. But looking to,
Visually,
yeah.
massive density in the fourth and fifth house on the right hand side on the
Well,
Placidus system. Massive
I'm
density there.
I'm glad you said that, because there's some stuff missing in Hellenistic astrology that's not showing up. So in Hellenistic astrology, they were only dealing with what they could see in the sky. So Hellenistic astrology only looks at the 7 traditional planets. So you're not going to get Pluto, you're not going to get Uranus, and you're not going to get Neptune. Those are not going to, you don't read those in a Hellenistic chart. And so that's why yours looks a little busier here, because you have 3 of those planets showing up that are not on the Hellenistic chart. So you're missing those. And for people who do Hellenistic astrology, some don't look at them at all. Other people like myself, if the planet is within 1 degree, then you look to it as being relevant, because otherwise it's a generational planet. For 20 to 30 years, it can be, it affects everybody in that sign. But for you, for example, Uranus and your moon are almost within half a degree. So I would actually look at that in your chart, because to me that would matter, because they're so close and you would feel an impact on that. So it's looking less busy, because not only have we taken out the 3 outer planets that are down in that quadrant, you've also got the vertex here, which is not a planet, it's a point. So it looks a little bit busier down here without those points. And what's extra in Hellenistic astrology is we also look at lots. Both charts have it. There's like a little glyph, so people who can't see this, but when they look at their charts later, that has a little X in it, that's the lot of fortune. And in Hellenistic astrology, above and beyond looking at fixed stars, is you can get a lot of information looking at the lots, most specifically the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit. And the lot of fortune for you, this is a really positive thing in your chart. You've got your lot of fortune in the same house as your midheaven and your sun. And it's the 9th house is like the house of God, like a really great house in Hellenistic astrology. So you're really hooked up good for like kind of career and that kind of thing. Lot of fortune is the stuff that comes to you from outside of yourself. Like maybe the help that you get from others, the things that are outside of your control. That's more lunar. Like, so again, instead of imagining you and going outwards,
would that include things like our spirit guides or cosmic energy? Like, is that what you mean by kind of outside of our self energy?
It can literally mean like just no humans in your life. Like my son has a lot of fortune in the 8th house, which is death, but it's also inheritance, things from others. He gets stuff, like he would get, like grandpa would give him things, or if he was part of groups, he'd be able to draw stuff or donations from other people and bring it to the group. So it's more like not like knowledge and even material things like inheritance, money. If you're looking at someone's chart for work, for career and purpose, sometimes you look at the 8th, because if you have benefic planets like you do in the 8th, that person could have received those good things from outside of themselves coming to them. So not necessarily the unseen, but also very much, in this world. And your lot of spirit is that comes from you and where you put your energy. And so your lot of spirit is down in the 5th house, and your lot of fortune is up here in the 9th. And we'll get to your Hellenistic one in a minute, but those are a couple of extra points that really just add a little bit more. So we may have taken away those outer planets, but now we've brought in some of the lots to give us some more information about your chart.
I think I've heard of the lot of fortune, but not the lot of spirit.
There's if you look over, well, and for those who can't see, but I'll point this out here in the Hellenistic chart, there's 7 main lots. You've got spirit, fortune, necessity, eros, courage. There's these different ones. 3 main ones that you work with, even from a predictive context. I will look at a lot of spirit from zodiacal releasing if people want to know what's coming down the road for them for career and for job, and how is this timing for this.
Spirit
Is more kind of more career, more of your, like, think of your sun, your purpose, the out in the world. A lot of fortune is your body. And so people like me for night charts, I look a little more heavily on fortune because we process a lot through our bodies as well. You know, people like, again, moon, body, physical, that kind of thing. A lot of fortune can tell you stuff with your health. And then a lot of arrows can tell you about relationships and not just romantic. But if people do have questions about relationship, I'll do zodiacal releasing and I'll use that. So let me pull up. And again, hopefully you don't need to see this visually, but for those who are looking at it visually, you can get a sense. And I'm going to switch over to just looking at your chart specifically.
And I guess for people who are curious, and of course they're going to run and do their chart now, so they can do this on astroseek.com.
They do. And I was going to say I have a video on my website, so we should maybe pop that down in YouTube that specifically says, how do you bring it up? Yeah, step by step, how do you bring it up? And it's really short. It's just a couple.
I think we'll probably do some, Googling or YouTubing on lot of spirit, and things like that. Do you have some videos about that too?
I've gotten into some of the basics and I'm continuing to add, and I don't want people to get lost, because this is me pulling up a traditional zodiacal chart. So for those that aren't seeing it, it's basically just your traditional chart or your normal chart, except it doesn't have the outer planets. But for those who are going to go to look at this zodiacal one, you start scrolling down, you've got the zodiacal releasing, you've got annual perfections. This is why it can be useful to check in with an astrologer, because there's so many moving parts. It's like having a lot of ingredients. Like if we pulled up in AstroSeek, they tell you what does it mean to have Jupiter in the 6th house. They tell you what it means to have Jupiter in Capricorn, but it doesn't tell you what Jupiter in Capricorn in the 6th house together means. Yeah. So it's like having a bunch of ingredients, but like you got butter and you got some sugar and you got some salt, but when they make different things when you put them together, and translating it can be a lot. But nonetheless, I still recommend, and I've also got a video up there on how to even just pull your chart up in whole sign that gives you those interpretations underneath, so you can just start getting familiar with your chart.
So what I'm seeing, just this, like without knowing too much about Hellenistic, but just looking at these two charts, just looking at what planets, new information is there, it feels like even the astrologers or those who are very expert in looking at it, it just adds now different aspects with these. It's interesting that's called Hermetic Lots as well, but because I'm very into the Hermetics, I think it's a great thing for people to tune into, to look at these lots and what they mean and where they're showing up in their houses. I would say, like, that's what's popping out at me. Yeah. There's a lot of details. There's the night and day aspect, which I think already gave another dimension. And then these lots feel like they're quite interesting as well.
Well, are you familiar with Hermes Trismegistus? To that?
Yes. In fact, I have the Hermetics, the Kabbalion right over here, and we've got Hermetics books. So
this is going to be your thing.
Hermetics.
This is Hellenistic astrology is attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, for what it's worth. That's there's plenty of places where you can get some of that deeper history of Hellenistic astrology, but usually I don't share that because people say who. But for you and for people who are familiar, there's definitely that. Yeah. It's so much fun. And again, for people who may go and who aren't seeing this right now, but might go to their charts, there are some clues that you can get too that they help you out. Like there's colors around the wheel, and those are connected to earth, air, water, and fire. So you can even look at a chart without knowing, like, what do those squiggles mean? You might not know what the squiggles mean. You might not know that that's Aquarius, but because you know the color, it's like, oh, well, that's air. And so you might still be able to take in some information looking at the chart without necessarily
Yes.
understanding what every little glyph means. And even the planets, there's connection if you go to even traditional Chinese medicine, the 12 meridians
Yes.
are connected. It's so stunning, like 12 houses, signs, 12 meridians within the body. There's
Oh, I didn't
connection.
know that. My
Yeah,
husband is a Chinese medicine doctor, so I'll be interested to see how this relates. I'm just seeing different pieces, and I think that's again the beauty of using maps. It's like, there is universal truth, but how it's come through different people. So it's come through
yeah.
Hermes in this way and bringing
Mhm.
it forward, right? So in this one, we can see the 12 meridians, and it's like, oh, cool. Like I wonder, how that shows up. So where would people look for the meridians?
Well, no, that's a whole nother thing. I think that's going to be
That's
beyond
a
the scope, and we can
separate
do that.
episode.
But what I can tell you, which will fall underneath this, is if you think yin and yang or yin and yang, however you prefer to say it, that's present in the chart. And so so each planet within Hellenist, or in each sign in Hellenistic astrology, is connected to a planet. So Cancer,
Mm-hmm.
for example, is the moon, Capricorn is Saturn. And other than Leo and Cancer, which are just the sun and moon, every other one has one planet and two zodiac signs. And they're both the yin and
Mm-hmm.
the yang. So they're the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
So you've got the different expression within the zodiac signs there. So Jupiter, for example, rules Sagittarius and Pisces. So even
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, you could guess if you looked at the circle of the wheel with, Sagittarius having red, fire, and Pisces being blue, water, you'd be able to tell which one is more yin in nature, which one is that. So
Mm-hmm.
you can bring that into it. And then each of the planets are also associated with hot and cool and wet and dry. So that's where you can start getting into some of the medical stuff, or even how does it cross with TCM, is when you start knowing those elements without necessarily going to diving deep into those meridians. Um,
Yeah.
but looking at your chart, and people who want to do purpose, for example, and have fun, like I was
Yes,
saying
absolutely.
before we got
Purpose. What would
on,
we?
yeah, like you can't not, first of all, you can't, this is where I find so much grace, so much compassion, and just so much awe from this form of astrology, because first of all, we didn't screw up. What I see when I look at people's charts and our own charts, we didn't take the wrong path. It wasn't our fault, the bad stuff that happened to us. You can see it in the chart. And sometimes when I read a chart for somebody, I might just say as simple as, yeah, it looks like it might have been hard, harder for you growing up, and you leave it at that. And sometimes you can go a little bit deeper and you can see what areas it happens in. But first of all, you didn't screw up. There is not one single solitary chart that I've read where somebody isn't living their purpose that is showing up in their chart. Like nobody is off track. Everybody
But
I've
then how
read
do
for,
you explain, more in the again mundane world,
yeah,
3D world?
yeah,
People just really have it tough, and I can think of, definitely some specific people in mind who
yeah,
just really seem plagued with trauma that they can't
yeah,
release,
yes,
really time career wise,
yeah,
abundance wise, like whatever the wound is, whatever the
yeah,
issue is.
yeah,
So whilst life and what's written in the stars will play out, and they
yeah.
don't know, right, this masterful plan of how it's going to express, how
Mhm.
do we give them comfort that the trauma and the hardships is not is not stopping them from living their purpose? Do you know what I mean? Because for a lot of
Exactly.
people who struggle, it really does seem like very far off purpose, very
Yep,
far off the track.
I hear that. And when we look at the chart, we can see that we're not just Saturn and Mars. And I think that's part of the takeaway, the difficult stuff, because that's where you're going to see the challenges in the chart, most likely connected to Saturn and Mars, or difficult aspects with Saturn and Mars. And what we can
Hmm.
do, first of all, is we can get understanding of where has that played out in someone's life. So again, looking in your chart within whole signs, you've got both of the malefics in the same place. So you have Mars and Saturn both in the fourth house, which is the house of home.
Fourth house.
Fourth
Oh
house,
yeah, yeah.
home and ancestry. Somebody who has that, without going too deep, is somebody, especially their early life, there would have been challenges at home, challenges with growing up, challenges around the house, even challenges with what home meant, maybe with even where they
Yes.
lived or the actual home. So the first thing it can do is validate. It can validate with what you're feeling is real. So it's not, so it's acknowledging, and so it's not bypassing, it's validating. Yeah, that's real and it's there. But then we can also see, what are other things in your chart that are helping you? What are things that you can reach to for support? So maybe, something might look difficult, but what's strong in your chart? What are other places, or even knowing if there's a challenging aspect? Because it's one thing to just know that there's challenges in a certain area, but then it's like, well, what do you do with it? Like, well, thank you, you've
Yeah. So how do you
confirmed.
find?
What do you do?
Yeah, it confirms, validates, but sometimes it can almost like press that shit in deeper, you know? It's just like, you see, I told you, it's already there. So how does one look at what is strong or helpful? How do they know where to turn to? So if you're
Yeah.
able to point Mars and Saturn probably being difficult, look at the house, look at where it shows up. So
Mhm.
where are the help powers that one could look to also validate that they have this strength and support in their chart?
Well, and again, that exactly. So it's about healing and transforming. It's not, this is my lot in life, so I'm just going to give up because this is so hard. Because again, there's other aspects. Because remember, we're more than just, one part. And so first it would be finding out, listening to the person of what they're coming with. Because just because they have challenging aspects, that may not be affecting them with work, but maybe it is affecting them with relationship. Maybe it's affecting. So first it's finding out what area of their life that challenge is happening in, looking to see what's there. And then there's different remediations that you can do with Saturn, with Mars. So somebody with a Mars, for example, that's overexpressed, like some of that intense energy, that, or even for me, inflammatory stuff. What can we do
Yeah,
to bring
yeah.
a cooling nature to it? So what can we do to balance that? People can do
Hmm.
different modalities. Some people bring homeopathy to it. Some people can bring acupuncture to it to balance those things out. For some people, there's some houses that I look at, some placements I look at for overall health and well-being. And when Mars comes up as one of the areas, it's, well, is there a way that they can channel some of that energy? Is it in something
Hmm.
physical? Is because there's something physical they can do with that energy, whether it's walking or their form of movement, or what kind of way can we channel those energies? Because the idea is that these things are going to express. So let's give it an avenue of expression that doesn't feel quite as challenging to experience, like in your body or in your life. So can we find avenues of expressions for these areas that are difficult? So if Saturn is really difficult, that's something that's some people use. That's something that I have. Some people work with crystals, and so might be like work with obsidian, work with the level of my Saturn. I think I need like an obsidian temple that I need to go to. So sometimes it's like, and it's like, I'm sorry, but a stone isn't going to be quite enough for the level happening in my chart. But sometimes there's something
Hmm.
called planetary charities, or working with the energies of the planet. So for Saturn, Saturn is connected with homeless people, and Saturn is affiliated with Saturday. So are you giving? Can you donate? Can you give? Do you help? So planetary charity. So there's different ways that you can create some avenues of expression for these things
Yeah.
that are showing up in your chart that's challenging. So that would be my answer, would be, if you're really feeling like there's something specific challenging you, you can work with that, and you can find ways to give it a different outlet of expression in your life.
Well, I think expression, you say it really well with that. It's like all these things, yeah, it can help validate, but if we're wanting to change and shift energy, to shift the pattern, I think it's finding ways for the energy to move through. It can move through difficult, like a bottleneck of energy, or it can move
Exactly.
through and just stream out as well. And I know that we can talk a long time about all of these really fascinating topics, so we do have to
I know.
wrap it a little. But tell us anything else. Like, what if people, I'm sure that, people are gonna run their charts. So we've got the lots that are different. We've got the day and the night that we can look at, and feeling for themselves. Oh, I had a question. So we're talking about purpose here, and
Yes.
how and express that, or know that, look, it's happening whether we're conscious of it or not. But of course, if
Mhm.
we can bring more awareness to it, fabulous. So how does this relate? What's your view of how does this relate to us and free will? Like, how much are we
Yeah.
actually creating our destiny, and how
Yeah,
much is just it's fate, it's written there? Do you know what I mean? Like, how much are we actually creating the life that we
absolutely.
envision? How much is, look, it was going there anyway?
If you look at the signs, for example, so for you, you've got your sun in the ninth house. Ninth house has got a few different things associated with it. It has its long distance travel, it's higher education, there's spirituality, kind of philosophy connected to that. There's even publishing. So that's a big umbrella. So if somebody has ninth
Mm,
house, there's a lot of avenues of expression there. And so
mm.
it's not just ninth house, oh, you're going to do long distance travel. Now I have ninth house stuff too, and I actually do all of them. So it's like check, check,
Yeah.
check, check, check for all they mean.
I was gonna say, oh, I worked for an airline. I've moved around the world. I saw the whole Mars and Saturn thing in the fourth house. Well, I had to leave home, to like work on
Mhm.
that healing thing. That's why I don't live
Yeah.
there anymore. So
Yeah.
when, as you're saying, the spiritual work, yep, like the
Yeah.
teaching, it's teaching, but at spirit level, or at different level.
Yeah, absolutely. So even though it might be there in the chart, there's different ways for it to express. And you are just going to be naturally drawn to those areas. It's like
Mm.
amazing to see, because I've done the youngest chart I've done. I pulled a chart for someone who's 3 months old, and the oldest I've gone way up. And it's really fun to see just how much these things do wind up playing out, that you do gravitate towards. It's more for confirmation, but for people looking at the chart and really maybe going back to something that's a little bit different for Hellenistic astrology. Sun is purpose. So sun is
Mm.
is going to be like kind of what you're drawn to, but it's really important to look at your ascendant, the ruler of your ascendant. For you, see, you've got a double thing going on. The ruler of your ascendant is Leo, and
Yeah.
your, or not, that's not the ruler of your ascendant, but your ascendant is Leo and the ruler is the sun. So you've got your sun, and so purpose is definitely going to be, how are you going to express your purpose? Well, through expressing your purpose kind of thing. It's like how you express
It's like,
is through the vehicle. I know, right? Yours is kind of like really straightforward, but purpose matters for you because your midheaven is in the same house as your sun, which is in the same house as your ascendant ruler. And so that is something that's going to have a strong focus in your life. And for people for fun who are pulling up their chart, if they want to know how aligned they are with their purposes, the three houses that you look to are the second house, the sixth house, and the 10th house. The 10th house is pretty common. Midheaven doesn't always land in your 10th. It's either usually 9, 10, or 11. But 10th house is usually
mm-hmm.
associated with career. The sixth
Mm.
house is associated with how you do that career, like your preferred work environment. And then the second
Mm.
house is almost like the way that you make money. And for yours, you'll notice everything is earth sign. And so that would just tell me right off the bat, that you're grounding this. You're taking all of your fire and you're grounding that. That's part of what you do. I would also peek at
Mm.
the eighth house, because if you look at the 10th, so for people who are like, well, wait a minute, I'm looking to my 10th house for purpose and it's empty and there's no planets there. So that must not matter.
Mm.
You can look to who's the ruler. Say for you, it's Taurus. Well, the planetary ruler of Taurus is Venus. Where's Venus in your chart? And we can get some more information. So your Venus is over in the eighth house. So again, just
Mm.
because you have an empty house, that would be my
Yeah.
takeaway. Doesn't mean that house doesn't matter. You just look to whoever is the planetary ruler of that sign, and then look where that is in your chart.
So just to recap that, because I thought that was brilliant to highlight. So we're saying for people to look and get a gauge of if they're expressing or living out their
Yeah.
purpose, they should look at these few houses, which we'll repeat
Yes.
again.
Yes.
Looking at them means that we're looking to see what planets are in that house. Is that correct?
We can see if there's planets, and if there are no planets in the house, then we'll look to whatever sign that's in, what planet is connected to that, and look where's that planet in the chart. So again,
And when
for
we
example, yeah.
that means, so can we just hypothetically just do one example so people know what it is? So if we were to look at, I don't know, you said the second house was important.
So for the
So is there any
second house, yep, second house is associated with money and resources. It's usually, traditionally
right?
associated with that. And if you're looking at career, that might be the way that you make money. And so for you, that's a Virgo. So see how it's completely empty? You might be like,
I
wait a minute,
do.
there's no
Tell
planet.
me, how am I going to make money?
Nothing's going to
So,
happen. But Virgo
see, so
rules
then we
Mercury.
ruler of Virgo,
Yep. And that's Mercury, and that's up in the ninth house.
Mercury. So we're back into the ninth house, which is super packed already.
Right? You've got your lot of fortune, your midheaven, Mercury, and Sun. Mercury's communication. So to me, that would also tell me that communicating for you, again, this podcast is just perfect for you as an avenue, right? This is just so right on. So that would be the how. So second house is a bit of the how. And if it's empty, look to who the planet is that rules it. Sixth house is the work environment that you prefer. So six, it's not
Okay,
just
so
illness and
house,
injury, it's the
I think I've
daily.
got from there. So
But yeah,
Jupiter is in the sixth house. So what does that mean?
so that's somebody who, just because it's in fall, you're still bringing like this expansiveness, like this really, this is somebody who's a hard worker, but you also have optimism. So you're not like just this like, okay, I'm just
Yeah.
like this hard sludgy worker. You still will have an expansive optimism that you'd bring to that. So already with Virgo, somebody with, their details, you add in this hard worker and the six, but you have this expansive lightness that you bring to it. So your preferred work, and like you would want to be in a work environment where like people aren't pulling their own weight. Like that's kind of how I
Yeah.
would say. So,
Yeah.
Capricorn sixth
Also
house.
interesting when I reflect back on my professional life. So when I started out, which was in corporate, back in 2000, I don't know, 9, and I was
Yeah.
an auditor, and that means like
Of
attention to
course you
detail,
were. Of course.
like detail. But then, when you're talking about, people needing to pull their weight, more recently in my corporate career, like back in, I don't know, 2018, 19, I was the chief financial officer for a company. And it was just like, I don't care how you get it done, just get it done. It was really like
Yeah.
needing them to own their work as they come into it. Like we all have, shit to do.
Yes. Yes.
Fabulous.
No, beautiful. And see, and we didn't even look, and so most people just look at the 10th, but you can see how much information we got from the second house and the sixth house. It just
Yeah.
adds some of those extra layers for understanding what you're bringing to
Absolutely. Well,
purpose.
so multifaceted and so many things. And I think we've already given our listeners some new perspectives,
Yeah.
hopefully, to tune into. So look at your second, sixth, eighth house. Did I get that right? Did I miss
If you
one?
look at your
Maybe.
eighth, you can look at your eighth, that's optional. Because you have planets there. You have Venus there. And so again, it would be normally the house of death. Now it's more like the house of transformation, inheritance, that kind of thing. You have Venus there. And Venus in Pisces, I might have said Jupiter might not be happy in Capricorn, but Venus really likes being in Pisces. And so to me, that would also seem like you would have, whether things come to you through connections, but like things would come to you. And you definitely have like an element of like arts or beauty or finance because of Taurus up in your 10th of what you would be doing for career. So because your 10th house is empty, the ruler of your 10th house, or not the ruler, but your sign, it's in Taurus, the ruler is Venus. So then we would peek over to the 8th, that's where your Venus is. And accountants
Mm.
are even associated in the eighth house for what it's worth. So people dealing with
It's
numbers.
all written there. The
Really
pathways are all.
is. It is. It is. So do you have free will? Absolutely. Can you choose to be, you know, uh, with a long distance travel or somebody who's doing higher education in either or you can do all of the above. But you do have free will. But just like if you're living in America versus another country, you have free will, but within the realm of where you're at. That's kind of like what the stars are, and what your charts
Yeah.
are. So do you have free will? Yes, but you are informed by the ether, the space, wherever you're at. Exactly.
I mean, it's a little like that nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
It's like you're absolutely going to be influenced by energies around. And, maybe there's more optimal places where certain energies are already running there. I think that's a whole other field
Yeah.
of astrocartography, right? Like looking
Yeah.
at where the energies are,
Yes.
where you are in the world. So, look, we're just getting into the Hellenistic astrology, which for now, we're just going to, close that. So, thank you, Tracie,
Yes.
for looking at the
Yes.
chart, just
Yes.
bringing some. The reason we look at the chart in this detail as well, just to give some examples, is seeing that it's not just looking at a planet and reading on Google what it means, but it's like being able to interpret that whole story, right? And you can talk 5 hours about someone's chart because there's so many different things to highlight. So I
Exactly.
guess just having received what you shared now, I would ask people to run their chart, sure, but look at the things in their life that they're struggling with or wanting more insight or wanting to dive deeper, and then go and look at the charts to get some information. Otherwise, we could be rabbit holing in this and talking 10 hours just on one person's chart, and this is the complexity and magnificence of who we are as well. There's so many layers that we could look at.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to kind of wrap up the intro to Hellenistic astrology before we wrap up this beautiful little chat?
Don't assume the worst. You look at your chart. It's easy to get scared when you see the malefics. So anybody who's running their charts, I know one of my first things when I was learning astrology was like, Saturn is in fall and he's combust and he's conjunct my sun and my north node. My life will never get better. And that's just not the
Mm,
case. So don't let it scare you and don't let it overwhelm you. So just look at it. You can do, it's called chart gazing, see what speaks to
mm,
you. If you want some support for understanding different things, reach out for support. Otherwise, there's a lot of tools that you can get as well. But the biggest thing is it's so easy to go fatalist with this, and look for the worst
mm,
stuff. And so my biggest takeaway would be just making sure that we don't get too pulled into looking at the one thing that's not good when there's 9 other
yeah,
things that are good. And just
yeah,
remember, like, look for the good in your chart as well. Yeah.
absolutely. I'm always a glass half full, but it's more than half full. It's more than you think. All right.
Yes.
So
Yep.
thank you so much, Tracie, for sharing all your wisdom and letting us have just this brief look into Hellenistic astrology, as I'm sure there will be more. I'll be sharing all of Tracie's links and where you can book in if you'd like to have a reading, and also just to run your chart, just have a look, have a feel. We actually went quite into some of the details of my chart, but have a look at yours. What draws your attention? What are you looking at? And I'm sure that we can get some beautiful insights to help us to embody more of who we are. So thank you for being on the show. And I'm sure that it's not the last time that we'll be chatting. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's such a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.